In conversation with some fascinating ladies who've changed the game in the world of video, music and gaming. Only on Hungama's Women Game Changers podcast.
Hi, welcome to Hungama Game Changers 2025. We're delighted to have you with us, join us for another season, as we enter our fifth year of celebrating and amplifying women who are not just playing the game, they're changing it. The person I have with me is somebody who was not chosen for the reasons that you typically see in the entertainment space. It's not from an aspect of chasing fame and followers. The person I have with me is here because of impact. She's probably making more of a change and impacting more people who will be the creators of this country for many years to come. Meghna Ghaipuri, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for playing the game the way you do, and thank you for the impact that you continue to make and the intention you do it with.
Thank you so much. It's honestly such an honor to be doing this with you. Thank you.
Okay, Meghna, I'm going to start with the obvious and then we'll kind of move from there. You come from a very illustrious film background and there's so much expectation and scrutiny that also comes with, I'm sure, opportunity. Plus, this was education at a time where Bombay as a city had almost no flags to plant in as a film school or a university. So this has been a big effort, and it's been an effort that I don't know how many people realize you have been such a core architect of. So, tell me about actually getting into making this the choice for what you're going to do. Did it just happen? And then the journey and the learnings that you've had over the last 15 years.
Well, I wish I had a more interesting or really trailblazing answer to this, but to be honest, it just happened. I was really young. I just finished college in London, and I was trying to extend my time there to stay back and enjoy my freedom and all of that. I knew I had been obviously as a kid on film sets. I had seen my father work really hard. The only time we got with him was if I was free from school and I could go on his set and spend time with him. So a lot of my memories of my father is watching him work, right? And so I knew that this was something that existed, this world existed, but I didn't know if it was for me. And kudos to my parents, because I was for a very long time the only child, and they were very, very clear about the fact that I would have a career. It was like an affirmation every day that my mom would tell me, you have to. And it was no pressure, but she's just like, we'll be so proud when we see you like that. It was just an amazing kind of way of encouraging. And whereas my other friends in school were just like, their parents were like, let her turn 18 and then we'll get married or whatever. So back then it was like that. So it was very different in that sense. And then I went off to college and I did management. So my father had been introducing me to work from a very early age. I think I was 13 or 14 that from every summer holiday, I was going to office and working there. So I would observe. I was part of Pardes from script to the end, just through my holidays. But luckily, the holidays kind of coincided, and I was able to be part of the scripting, and then the shoot, and then, of course, the post-production, and then finally the marketing and distribution. So through Pardes, I really got to learn the entire thing on the ground. And that's when I really decided that I don't think I can do creative stuff. I really enjoyed marketing. I really enjoyed the business side of, releasing a film and the distribution. So I decided I was doing management at that point, and I decided to pursue that a little further. After I finished my graduation, I joined a company which was a startup. It was in the media field, but it was an e-commerce company, one of the first back then. And I had a great time because it was a startup. I got to learn a lot. I got to ship parcels as well as make presentations to big media companies. And I think that really shaped me. I feel now, looking back, I feel that shaped me as a leader because I was part of a team which was really small, and I appreciated what everybody did. In
Oh
that
my
sense.
God! What you learn bootstrapping, you never learn
Exactly.
with scale. Yeah.
So that happened, and then my dad called and said, "I want you back." I remember in the 1980s, I told you that I wanted to start a film school, and I want to do it now. And I thought this is just a strategy for him to get me back, because he really wanted me back, and I was making excuses. And I thought, no, he's such a filmmaker at heart. How will he build a school? Honestly, I was not sure that he was even going to do it. But me being the dutiful daughter that I am, I came back, and we started working on it. And honestly, Whistling Woods was nothing. There was no name. We didn't have a name. We just had some things on paper, and then we started researching. Now, in hindsight, it makes sense why he wanted me back then, because it took us about 5 or 6 years before we started Whistling Woods. But he wanted me to be part of the entire research, everything that went into it. I was very young and a woman. So it was important for me to have some, I would say, advantage to be part of an organization and actually start heading it right from the start. So I think that was my biggest advantage. The fact that I was there from the time that was just a thought in his mind.
Part of the decision making, why you're doing it the way you're doing it.
Yeah, and also shaping that decision along the way, right? Or what he did, what he wanted to do. So we did a lot of the research. We, in the sense, we were a 2-3 member team, that's it. And we visited all these different universities all over the world, came back with research, drafted curriculum, went and spoke to industry. So all of that really taught me so much that I think I feel now that was my training to build a school, because honestly there was no course to do.
There's no course
to start up
on how to run a school. There are no courses.
Or start, and there was no other schools in India that were doing what we wanted to do.
Yeah.
There were a couple, but they were not what we wanted to do. There were also no schools abroad doing what we wanted to do. So it was really a lot of, minds coming together, a lot of back and forth, and then coming up with something like Whistling Woods. So that's how it started.
Okay. Since you brought up, bringing you in early, especially so that you're not disadvantaged by the fact that you are a girl, and it becomes very easy to have people talk over you and things like that and sort of not give you that fair chance. Plus, as a woman, I find that a lot of people who have grown up around families with a little bit more of an illustrious background, did you feel like there were people that kind of waited for you to fail?
Yeah, of course.
I mean,
I don't know if they waited for me to fail, but they told me. Some people actually told me to my face that you don't deserve to be in this position. You know why you're here. And I said to them, yes, I do. And I understand that I don't have as much experience as you, and I'm here. But remember that you'll be gone in a few years, but I'm here to stay. This is what I have, and this is what I have to build.
Right.
So I think a journey of an entrepreneur is so different from people who come in and do a job, right? Because I feel we have everything. This is it. This is what we've built, and this is what we have. We don't have a choice to just get up, resign, and go and get another job.
Oh my God. An educational institution is forever.
Yes, absolutely.
It's going to outlive you.
Absolutely. And that was the idea, right?
Yeah.
Right from the start, we were building a legacy, which is why it's not called Subhash Ghai Film School, right? Because we gave him those ideas. We all went with these presentations to name the film school, and he said, rubbish, this is going to be above me. This is going to live beyond me, and it cannot be restricted to my name, which I felt was, wow. I never had known my dad to be so generous and so humble at the same time. I felt that is actually the moment when I realized that this really means a lot to him. This dream of his is something he's really thought through over the years, because it would have been really easy. It would have been an easier sell.
With vision, right?
Yeah, and the vision that continues beyond you, right, and your children, and it just continues and leaves a legacy for the industry.
Meghna, one of the things that I find I mentioned this just before we started, you can't be what you can't see. I'm sure you're also seeing that we actually have a lot of women that enter the entertainment space. Unfortunately, they're not rising as far to the top in head of studios, or, I mean, I'm going to take talent off the table for obvious reasons, but, in other roles. How are you kind of, seeing that? Also, how are you as an institution trying to correct for it?
So I think 20 years now to Whistling Woods this year, and I feel it's been...
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's been a concerted effort on my end from this time I started. And I was very young then. But when I saw a room full of men and I was the only woman, I was like, this is not right. It can't be like this. When you go... It was different. When you went into a TV studio, for example, when you went into an NDTV or whatever, you saw only women, right? But on a film set, that was not happening. Or even on a film set, if it happened, it was like you said, it was the junior, the assistants or whatever, right? Or the actors. But even in the corporate side, I felt even in our education space when we started, all our HODs were men, barring Aruna Raje, who we brought in as Vice President Academics to help us put the curriculum together. So it was her and me, and we had another person, who was helping us build the school. But otherwise, there were only men. And I felt this has to change. And then I also thought to myself that if I want more women to join the industry, I need to make Whistling Woods. I need to lead by example. I need to have more leaders in Whistling Woods. More of our HODs need to be women so that girls see it as a safe space. Girls have role models to look up to.
Right.
And so I have to say it hasn't been organic. It has been conscious effort in, trusting the women who I came across with responsibility.
I have to say, it's lovely when it's organic. I think it's better when it's intentional.
Yeah. I hope so, but I think it has worked. I think our numbers have grown, from the time we started to see more girls coming out of Whistling Woods doing really well in the industry, even in terms of media and, climbing up the ladder really fast in terms of, positions of decision making. As well as in the film world, I've seen the change, and so it's just kind of like to me, I think that is one of the things that I'm really, really proud of, that, we could make that shift, because at one point it seemed very, very difficult, almost impossible to do. So,
I think, in this, like overall, I think women in the workforce, the numbers are not great. Then you add entertainment as a filter and the numbers drop significantly. You add tech to that, and you start seeing in gaming and things like that, the numbers start dwindling even further. And that was actually one of the ideas when we started doing shout outs, podcasts with and amplifying the women that we think are doing great jobs, not just because I think they should be amplified. Of course we do. But I think also for more people to see these women and to say, hey, I could do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like not wanting to grow up and say, I want to be the first lady.
Yeah, absolutely.
I
mean, it's just still a few years ago, I had no students in animation and gaming who were girls. And now you see so many girls. So, I think the impact will happen. You'll see it in maybe 5 or 10 years where you'll start noticing women in, decision-making positions in the industry. But it is happening. I can tell you now because, we're kind of working with students. I know these girls are going to be the future. So yeah.
Tell me, 20 years, so, practically a generation, right? At what point did you realize that you had actually fallen in love with this space of education in your field? But because it happened, it was a calling, the responsibility. And I do know you to be somebody who does have a great sense of responsibility. But at some point now, when you talk of it with a lot of passion.
Yeah.
When did you realize that you're actually falling in love with this space?
I have to be honest. Initially, it was just for my dad. I was just like doing this because I wanted to make my father proud. Like all, girls, unfortunately, us women need that validation and that love. And I mean, not that I didn't have it, but I just felt like I need to do this for my dad. And he wants me to do this, so I'm going to do it. And the ownership didn't come for a long time because he is very involved in the institute. So it was always, what is it that you want, I'll execute,
Right.
But I think it was pretty much after the first batch that we took in, and I started realizing what an impact we are going to have on these students who are going to be professionals of tomorrow. You know, my sense of responsibility kind of doubled and tripled, because I realized that I can't take this, you know, I can't take this easy. I have to give it 110%, because I need, you know, it is too much of a responsibility
It is a big
that I'm taking on. And Dad, of course, was busy also making films during that time. So again, I felt like, no, this is important. And over time, when you meet students, when you saw their success, you know, when our first alumni huge success happened, which is Shashank's film Humpty Sharma Ki Dulhania.
Yeah.
I mean, he had called us for a special trial. All the students were there, and I actually went into the ladies' washroom after the film and cried.
Yeah.
I just sobbed, and they were so worried about me. They were like, you know, what's going on? But I was just so overwhelmed by the fact that we had done it. You know, we had actually, you know, and the student, and Shashank was not the only one. There were other students who were part of the crew. And I mean, even now I'm getting goosebumps and a little emotional, because it's every day that I see a student's name up there on the screen, or, you know, when I hear what they're doing on LinkedIn, it makes me so proud. And I think that is, it's like, it's not like something that, you know, you decide and you stay in love with, right? It's something that you decide every day that, you know, this is why I wake up in the morning, this is why I go into office, and this is what I do. And like we say, do what you love. This is why I love what you do, what I do.
Tell me, 20 years later, do you still have moments where you will have somebody, you know, well-meaning gentleman tell you how you don't understand and try and tell you how to sort of, you know, how do you stay in control of meetings that are outside of the system where you have your comfort and your control?
I think over 20 years, men around me know very well not to mess with me, even though I'm quite gentle in that sense. But they know not to piss me off. So I think they've been quite good. I want to also say that I did encounter men and women, okay, not just men, who really did not believe or thought I was just doing this, or I had got this opportunity because I was very clear about it. I think what worked for me was that honesty. I was very clear. I was like, yes, my dad has given me this, and yes, I do have this responsibility, and that's why I need you to help me, because this is what it is. And I think that helped me really, you know, get on with it in terms of, you know, getting my team together, or getting people who were against me also to start believing, because I feel honesty is always the right way to go. Being humble helps, you know, to maybe sometimes to the point of being annoying, but I think it helps, you know, because I feel people around you need to know that, yeah, okay, you know what, she's humble. But at the same time, you need to let them know that you know what you're doing. And for that, you really need to know what you're doing. You can't fake it.
It's a fine
You
line.
can't
And
fake
I
it.
think especially as women, we have to walk this line where you're confident and decisive.
Exactly.
But not overconfident and imposing.
Yeah. And I think, you know, like, I feel a lot of that comes on us women, but I think men need to do the same. I find it really annoying when men are, you know, unnecessarily obnoxious about, you know. I feel they also need to learn some humility. And I think that those lines are now blurring. I feel like more and more men and women need to have the same kind of traits. Men do need to learn to multitask better. And women do need to understand to not sell themselves too short. They need to be more
I
confident.
agree with you. I also think that they need to assert themselves. You know, something Purnima Kochikar, who heads Google Play, said when we were having a chat was, you know, we tend to soften our confidence and our decisions with, I think. And she says, don't think, no.
Yeah.
And I thought that was actually, for
Yeah.
me, a very interesting thing, because I see it
Yeah.
a lot. Another thing that I see that women tend to do a little less, including in this space, is networking and visibility. you're somebody who's shied away from a certain type of publicity and fame. But I see you on panels and I see you on juries. I see you give interviews. I see you as ambassadors to different organizations. Where do you think kind of networking and visibility come in? And how do you walk this line? Because I think you're doing a good job of sort of maintaining the seriousness of your profession, and it may be allied, affiliated with the film industry, but you're in the space of education,
Absolutely.
in the field of education.
Yeah.
So how do you decide how much is too much?
Yeah.
How do you, as somebody who is in the creative and creative adjacent space, manage that?
That's a really interesting question. I always say that, like work-life balance, it doesn't exist. Like in the sense you're always juggling, right? And you're always taking those decisions. But thank you for that, because I needed to hear that. As I'm always still second guessing myself that should I be networking more? Should I be going to more filmy parties? Should I be, I don't know. I feel like I go with my gut. I know who I am. And I know what Whistling Woods stands for so deeply that I will never ever say no to something that will hurt Whistling Woods. If something enhances the brand image of Whistling Woods, I will always say yes for that. But anything else, if I feel I don't have, there's so many other things that, a woman or anyone, sorry, I hate saying a woman because even a man needs to look at. Like Rahul and I, my husband and I, have a very equal relationship in that sense that, we both want to spend enough time with the kids. We want enough time at home. We want enough time with each other. We want to travel and we want to work. So I feel when they say, women have all these responsibilities, I feel he has as much, to handle. So I think that we need to decide that. And if you're saying that I've actually managed pretty well, then that's a huge compliment. Thank you so much. I'll sleep well tonight. But yeah, it's just an everyday thing.
As a educational institute, there is, there's a line you want to sort of not cross. But there's also visibility and thought leadership that you do want to maintain. And I think,
it's a lot of my team nagging. Sorry to interrupt, but my team nagging me to do these things as well. So
yeah, well done.
They get the credit as well.
Really well done.
And they have to really work on convincing me. So yeah.
I think Whistling Woods has also sort of now come over the last many years now, has established itself as really not just one of India's leading film schools, but also from an Asian point of view. So how are you seeing this sort of cross-border creativity work at a time where geopolitics are also becoming more insane? And do you have a lot of students that you are now hoping to start bringing in from different places? I mean, I know we have students from all over the country here. But, even from other nations and other sort of geographies like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, actually from year one, I mean, the reason we're called international, when we came up with that international, one of the biggest discussions we had, within the management was that international is not going to be one of those, RK International or whatever. It's going to mean something. So our first two deans were American, a good tenure of 8 years. We've had acting and music faculty who've been foreigners. We've always, from the start, done a lot of exchange programs with universities in Australia, the UK, and the US, where we've not just collaborated, these are the classes, this is the credits, and you just come, you learn here, we learn there. We actually come up with projects that they can do together. And this is without the funding, because we don't get any funding here in India. A lot of the funding that they have, or we just manage somehow. So I feel we've never taken that word international in Whistling Woods lightly. It's always been there. We've always put ourselves out there in terms of any collaboration, any research work. We've had students and faculty from NYU or SVA reach out to us saying, we just want to do research. Can we use your library? Of course, please come. We want to shoot something. Can we use your resources? Yes, please do. So this is something that we've done. In fact, I was in Boston a couple of years ago, 2019, just before COVID, and I went in for a kind of a tour of their school there. And I remember the sound HOD is also sound designer, and he said to me that he had worked on a short film with one of our students.
Oh, nice.
And has been doing, and I had no idea. He knew about Whistling Woods because of the student there. Animation, our students are working all over the world. They've got jobs in New Zealand, Canada, US, Europe, because of the training that they've received here. So it's always been that we believe very strongly that in the creative field, there are going to be no borders very soon.
Yeah.
People are, already that's, happening. And not just from the acting point of view. We see a lot of Indian actors crossing the border, but I'm talking about technicians. I'm talking about, directors, designers. It's going to be a lot of that. And we needed to train our students to really be able to work on a global kind of frontier. And technology plays a huge role in that.
I saw your
right?
emergence lab just now.
So, like, Sony's never done something like that with any film school in the world. We're the first and only even now. Having said that, Sony got all their cameras here. Our students worked on it. The industry now started using Sony because of them. Now we have Red on campus as well. And both of them are nicely coexisting because there is enough of a market for both. But they see that everything is emerging out of Whistling Woods. In terms of our partnerships, like last few years have been amazing in terms of our collaborations with various universities, because finally people are recognizing Whistling Woods as a global player. We also have our university partner TISS, Tata Institute of Social Sciences, that helps students immensely when they want to do a master's or even, go for an exchange anywhere in the world. On international students, again, we've had European, American students come to Whistling Woods since we started. It's just that we've never really gone and marketed ourselves globally, but organically they do come here because they find it's so much cheaper than film schools abroad. They find it gives them a lot more hands-on experience. We've had a student, I remember he did cinematography, he was Dutch, and he ended up living here. He learned Marathi and he does films. He's a cinematographer in India. So, there are people who are finding careers here. Daria is one of our alumni from Ukraine, and she's doing so well for herself.
Very well.
So she studied here and then she taught here, and then now she's just so amazing, right? So I think that we don't talk much about it, I guess, but it's always been international. And I'm there in Goa now on Sunday. I'm talking at the QS Summit, which is a global education summit. I'm on 2 panels there, and I think they do want me to talk about creative education and exactly what you asked, transnational education. And that is what we do. We're really working towards that.
Because I think, the creative space, and what you're creating is in content, right? It's the creators that will define what the industry is doing. But at a time where otherwise so many things are getting more polarized, we do believe that, more collaborative work is the only way to also get the general people to start thinking in a way that is more us and not them.
And opportunities. I think India, we make a lot of films, but we're still lacking trained talent, right? So when it comes to opportunities, I know a lot of Indian kids decide to go abroad to study, and that may be a choice because they want to, the exposure, they want to live abroad for those years. But I always tell parents and students that if you want a career in the Hindi or the Indian film industry, those 3 years are so crucial to be here, because you then network. You find friends in the industry while you're in film school.
Smaller jobs.
Yeah, not just that. Like, these are the kids.
And train.
And I see like so many of them collaborate and found companies after they graduate or work together. A cinematographer and a director, they're friends from film school. They work together for years.
In fact, I was just mentioning this to your colleague earlier. I believe for universities and colleges, this could be a bit of a moment, right? There's a lot of awareness. because $32 billion a year goes abroad in education that we pay colleges and things like that. A lot of those kids are coming back.
Yeah.
So if the goal was, I will find something over there, that may or may not kind of
Yeah.
happen. And it
Yeah.
won't happen just because you studied there.
Absolutely.
Now they'll want skill and, experience and things
And
like
network, contacts.
that. I think the other thing is also, I think the work here is becoming better. It's
Of course.
becoming, you have better stories.
Yes.
You have more interesting formats. I think a lot of the services within the animation and gaming space are also becoming a lot
Correct.
more meaningful. So I do think that for colleges and universities across the board, this is that moment where, putting
Yeah.
yourself a little bit more out there will hopefully get parents, and more than parents, the youngsters to
Yeah.
also realize that, what
Absolutely.
chhapa lag ke, nothing is going to change in your life.
Absolutely. I get so many calls from students who studied abroad, come back here and don't have jobs.
Yeah.
And they're like, can you find us an internship? Can you find us? And I'm like, I have my students to find internships for. But, it makes me so sad because their parents have spent so much money and I don't have to work that hard for our students, to be honest, because they have a network. Our film students get hired before they even graduate. So it's something that, I wish more parents and students, especially those who are really serious about a career in the creative arts, would understand.
Yeah, I also think that save that money for your first project.
Yeah.
Because let's face it, you may have to self-fund
Yeah.
your first feature.
Yeah, I agree.
Save that money and use it. Your parents will give it you a seed funding towards your first film. Okay. Tell me, how do you do the balancing act? What you end up seeing on from the outside looking in is a lot of ease and comfort, the way Meghna is able to handle it all and, be the mommy and the professional and all of that. I think what people tend not to see, especially in this space and industry, is the many failures and the crises and those really stressful moments. How do you kind of deal with that? Because even though it's education, because it's also entertainment, it's much more visible and public, right?
Yeah. And I think, having my dad as the founder also gives us a lot of eyeballs in that sense. Sometimes good, sometimes not
Correct.
so good. But I think for me, it's been a journey. I won't lie. I started very young. I was a very different person when I started out, and for the longest time. And I want to speak about this because I want the women who are starting out in their careers or just starting in leadership roles to understand this. That many a times I saw myself reacting when somebody said something. I would screech, I would scream, I would shout, I would get upset, I would storm off meetings. And I realized I was serving no purpose.
Yeah.
In fact, because I was a woman, a man could do it and get away with it. But because I was a woman and quite young, I was just being judged about it. And I was being told, oh, she's childish. Oh, let's just not invite her for these meetings. And it took a lot of, I would say, working on myself, reflection, understanding who I really am and what I really want. And I practice Buddhism, and I think that I started in 2012, and I can see the change in me since then. Like I can see the way I have evolved as a person, how I've shaped my journey, just being calmer in situations, responding rather than reacting, sometimes just being quiet. I think silence is such a powerful tool that very few people use. I feel being wise, in terms of, I feel wiser, when I have to take a decision. I feel wiser when I should speak, when I should not speak. Those are things that really, really we need to learn. So I think that a lot of women out there, I shouldn't say I think, I know that a lot of women, sorry, I took that as well.
It does
I
play
know,
on your mind.
yeah, I know that women out there have it in them, right? But what tends to happen is that we get told what to do, and we get influenced by that. And I think more and more, which is why I'm a huge, kind of, I forgot the word, but I really do promote, spiritual practice for all age groups, because I feel the calmer you are, when you know yourself, you'll be able to reflect that in your environment. You will attract the right kind of people as well, right? So it really is a lot of self-work. It's working on yourself. It's on a constant basis. It's not like, going off to a meditation camp and then coming back and then being your old self again. It's a daily practice that you need to do with yourself and understand who you really are, and then move forward. So I feel there have been so many challenges at Whistling Woods. And before 2012, I remember I would be a mess. I just couldn't handle it. It was just over time that I learned that that's life. There are going to be challenges. I also learned that all the challenges that we face so far and continue to face have always turned out to be opportunities in many ways, right? Even if it's a lesson that I learned that I would never do something again. So I think that each and every person out there needs to understand this at an early age. I wish I knew it earlier, but then I wouldn't be telling you my story. So,
No, I absolutely agree with you. So actually, Meghna has been working with me and helping me make my early basic small steps in meditation. And actually, I have gone on to speak to so many people about it, and I may be at that point where it's not as much as I would want it to be. But I think that, and I tell everybody, mindfulness of whatever time.
yeah.
It could be knitting. But the minute you stop distracting yourself in the beginning, I think the anxieties become tremendous, right? I also think as we start hitting leadership positions, women are also walking another path in their own personal transformation as they move into perimenopause and menopause. And so suddenly here you are making more high stakes decisions than you've ever done before. And you are suddenly anxious and indecisive as a human being, something you've never been before. I found that, when I started, I found that the first thing that comes flooding in is the what ifs, because the what ifs are the things that I feel that women, the number of balls they have right up in the air, and everything is balanced just so that you've got, everything must work for the baby just right, so that you can also be a consummate professional just right. And I think for me, the biggest transformation was I realized if this happens, then that will happen.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it may be not great, but that will happen. And then you kind of move on. And I think for me, it took almost 6-8 months before I stopped feeling horrible while I was in that space of mindfulness.
You. And I think it's something I tell my team as well, who are women and have younger kids. I just keep telling them, please be in that moment. When you're with your child, please don't feel guilty if you missed my call. Be with your child. I think that is important. And I know my kids may roll their eyes every time I take a work call, but it's okay. I feel that's also taught them so much about leadership, about responsibility, and I think that's what shapes them to be the people they are, independent people that they are, not self-centered as much. I think kids need to understand that they also will have responsibility. So I stopped looking for validation from my kids, for example, because I was like, no, I will get it when they are parents, and
I don't think I'm there yet.
They will get it when they become parents. I know I appreciated my mom like so much more when I had a daughter, and my mother-in-law when I had a son. I have to add that because I realize now the bond I have with my son, and I felt like, oh my God, I have to let him go one day, So I think that you need. I'd have come to that conclusion now, and they may see this podcast and roll their eyes again. It's okay. That's part of. They roll their eyes anyway, right? So I have to be used to that.
Okay. One of the things that we've been doing is also sort of understanding how. Like one of the things I do constantly when I mentor people from a couple of platforms that I work with is, getting women to feel, because women do need that sense of validation. They haven't seen it, they haven't received it at an early age. And so many, like yesterday, I was having a conversation with somebody, and really it was supposed to be a work thing. After the first 45 minutes, I spent an hour and a half, sort of validating your just decisions that had already been made.
Right.
And I feel that, women tend to allow themselves to be, sometimes talked over. You don't want to be aggressive, and you don't want to be difficult, loud. Some other words that I'll prefer not to add, but those are the, you're not assertive and confident.
Yes.
You are dictatorial and unpleasant, right? And these are just kind of realities. Now, in the creative space, outside of talent, one of the things that I keep seeing is that people also generalize the tone and the view of women professionals. It could be because it could be as a cinematographer or as a writer. I mean, Atika Chauhan told me, she says, some people write double entendre, I write gender, and it's okay. Yeah. I mean, I'm allowed to write that. Others will tell me that I have the ability to write anything. I can write a Telugu action comedy.
Yeah.
And I have absolutely no issues with that. And I think we're still in that place, but for that, a lot of roles are considered more apt for men. How are you kind of dealing with that at your personal level, but also in sort of maybe challenging that as an organization in terms of recruitment, as an educational institution in terms of teaching, also as somebody who has a voice in the industry?
So I think my approach has always been about equal opportunities for men and women, so even when it comes to HR policy, for example, if women are allowed to bring their kids to work, so are men. And in fact, I've encouraged men. In many staff meetings, I've said, why aren't you bringing your children to work? Give your wife a day off or let her be. Men don't like to do it because they like their freedom at work, I guess. But I feel that is something that needs to be encouraged all the time. I think that in terms of students, they need to find their own voice. A lot of the stereotype comes from us. So if I believe that, yes, a woman can't tell a story that is a slasher film or whatever, then I will actually not let it happen, right? At Whistling Woods, I don't think any of our faculty, any of the team staff thinks like that, So the students have a voice of their own, and they can make whatever films they want. And that is why a film school or a creative space like that becomes that ground for them to learn that they can go out there and do the same. There's not much I can do about the judgment that exists or the stereotypes that have been there for so many years. But it is shifting only because we are trying as well, right? In terms of educating our girls and boys on campus. We do gender sensitization workshops when it comes to film specifically, right. To let them know that, you don't need to have a boy and a girl as, hum do hamare do family, or one boy, whose name is Rahul and he'll be running around. Like, you don't need to have that in an ad film or a film. You can actually show a girl child and an only girl child. These are stereotypes that have actually been, and I don't see our film and creative world as so shallow or so close-minded. I feel they're very open-minded people. So if you have a conversation with them, if you have a conversation with ad directors or TV channels, they'll be quite open to these suggestions because it doesn't affect their script. So I think if it starts at this level when they're students,
Yeah, but somebody just needs to kind of point it out.
yeah, you just need to point it out. So when we point it out to our students all the time, they understand that, yeah, okay, why I don't need to cast a boy for this role. I can cast a girl as well. Or gender. We talk a lot about gender now. So I think that starts from education, which is why I feel training in education is so important. People say that, no, let me just join the industry. I'll just, get trained on the job. And of course, you get a different kind of training on the job. But the kind of foundation that we lay when you're doing a 3 years or a 4 years course, you learn so much about different point of views. You learn about what all you can do. There's a library of films that you can watch and discover yourself. Yeah, so those 3 years are so crucial.
That's true. Tell me, one of the things that we also try and do is for every person who comes and sits in this chair, we get them to do a shout out to 2 women that they think are doing a tremendous job in entertainment, changing the game in their own way. Those names go into our next year's cohort. And so I'd love to hear if you have any names that you'd like to suggest.
Wow, you're going to get me into trouble.
Not at all. These are just, women that you think are doing a great job, changing the game in whatever way they can. Some we may already have included in our cohorts before, but and you can even send this to me on email if you'd like to think about it a little bit more, because I think sometimes
I might give you a list of 10 or 15 or 20.
That's great, actually. I love that you have so many names to recommend.
Yes. I will. I'll do that. I'll think about it, and I'd like to give you a little bit of a range, so I'll do that. I'll email it to you.
Great. Before we sign off, because I am conscious of the time as well, and we can otherwise keep doing this. For somebody getting into this space right now, what is the one thing you'll tell them to stop doing immediately? And what is the one thing you'll tell them to start?
Stop believing others and start believing in yourself. I think that would be my advice to them, because we do get very swayed by opinions, judgments, what people think of us. But like I said to you, the more you self-reflect, the more you try to understand who you really are as a person, you will shine brighter than anyone else, and you will shut those mouths who are trying to bring you down.
1 minute. Before I move, I want to ask you what you are thinking, seeing, and teaching, given that AI is here to stay. It's democratizing entertainment, but it's also terrifying for a lot of creators. So how do you think it's going to become a tool that gets used, and how do you see it becoming a part of then your active curriculum?
I think it's exactly that, a tool. A very powerful tool, which is great because it will just enhance the workflows. It'll make things more efficient in the industry, and it will help us do things better, right? But the one thing that AI lacks is feelings and independent creative thought. So I could get a lot of creativity out of AI, but is it really coming from a space of my emotions and my feeling that I feel as a human being?
Also
Original thought. But I mean, again, we don't know what's original, what's not original, because there's so much out there, and so many thoughts also get repeated, But how do you tell a story? Yeah, what kind of feelings? And I always talk to my students. So I take one class, okay? In all these years, finally, they've convinced me to take one class. And my class is on social impact of filmmaking. And I talk about public service advertising. I talk about, making films for an impact, and the difference that filmmakers can make with their voice. And that I feel, and I always tell them that before you jump into choosing a topic, and going into making that film, go and experience it. Yeah. If you want to make something on climate change and plastic in the ocean, go and do a beach cleanup. Yeah. When you do that beach cleanup, when I did it for the first time, I actually, every time I do it, I'm amazed because I feel like, wow, I've cleaned up this patch and look at how good it looks. I turn around, I go back, and then it's back again in my life. And that teaches you a lot about life as well, to be honest. But I think the more they experience life, is what makes them better filmmakers, better creators. AI can't do that for them. Right?
The human experience and the human condition.
And I feel like initially, yes, AI was very interesting. All these AI films and shorts and microdramas were really, engaging. But now I'm just put off by them. I'm just like, please tell me if it's AI. I'm not going to waste my time watching it. At the end of the day, original thought, original creativity, the human touch will always, prevail. And I want to tell this to all the students, all the parents who are worried about it, and not just in the film and creative world. I think we honestly are the safest because ChatGPT does diagnose pretty well for you now, So I feel doctors, engineers, everybody is going to feel the impact of AI. But in the creative field, I think we're actually the safest because we can use it as a tool to just enhance our creative vision. But that vision will always come from us because we're talking to humans. We're not talking to robots, right? And humans will always, and you can see that in films that do well and that don't do well, they will always respond to that connection that they feel with the filmmaker.
Thank you very much. I think that's very well said.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Meghna, for joining us for this. Thank you for not just telling your story, but for telling the storytellers how they should be doing this. And thank you all for tuning into Hungama Game Changers 2025.
Thank you.
In conversation with some fascinating ladies who've changed the game in the world of video, music, and gaming. Only on Hungama's Women Game Changers podcast.